Hello and welcome to Supercoach Hub's NRL Previews podcast. Today we're looking at a position everybody wants to know stuff about, second row forwards. Now, there's a lot to cover tonight, so we're going to start off with what's on everybody's minds, the mid-ranges, and we'll see how we go. It might be a two-parter depending on how long it goes, but I'm here with Realm, Supercoach, and Catfish. How are you guys going?
Not too bad, thanks, Scoot. Happy to be here again after doing that front row forward episode. I'm happy to be moving on to a more exciting position.
Yeah, glad to be here, mate. It's going to be a very interesting position, so I'm sure we might as well just jump into it.
Yeah, there's so many. If you sort of call the mid-range bracket about 350 to about 550, I had a look for this episode, and I think I counted about 12 or 13 or 14 or something like that. And there's only it's a discussion as to how many you actually want versus going cheap or putting someone a bit more expensive like a Murray or something like that in your team. Anyway, so we'll get into it. First up, the most relevant news from the position is we've had Ryan Sutton just come out and have some knee surgery. He's going to be out for 8 to 10 weeks. So at least for the first month or so of the season, we're going to see a bit of an uptick, and that could give someone like Liam Knight, who's got the second row duel, a little bit more security. So he could be someone we potentially look at. And the Cowboys also named Dearden and Cotter as their co-captains, and there'll probably be a little bit of discussion about whether that'll affect Cotter much and if we think that's going to keep his minutes up or whether Dean's going to run the show while they're on the field. Anyway, so we'll start with those mid-ranges. Might as well just start from the top price and go down. So, Catfish, have you considered Cotter at all this preseason?
It's interesting because I think he's been quite popular. I've seen a lot of draft teams with Cotter in there, usually in the front row forward though. So I feel like if you're going to put him in somewhere, that's probably the better spot to do it. Personally, I love Cotter, don't get me wrong. You know, proud Queenslander and all. Even though he plays for Cowboys, it's all good. But I just feel like his game does not always translate as well to Supercoach. He's just not your typical kind of, tackle busting, offloading, try scoring machine. He tackles defensively. He's everywhere. He's all heart. Love the way he plays. Just I don't think it always translates to Supercoach. So I feel like there's probably better options. Not to say he's not an option, but for me personally, I'd rather look elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a funny one because even when he had that really good 2022 season, it was still only about 6 or 7 points above what he did last year. So, I mean, there could be some bounce back, but I mean, how much are you looking for? Have you got any other thoughts around that realm?
Yeah, I just for a guy that's never averaged over 60, it's not a question of his work rate or whether or not he can do it. Like, because he'll come out and have a game where he scores 80 points and 65, 70 of them are in base. And it's not a question as to whether or not he can back it up week in, week out, because we all know if the opportunity is there, he will. It's just whether Peyton would want him to. And it's been pretty clear over the last 2 years that Peyton doesn't want him continuously doing that because it's just going to put his body through hell, so he's not available for finals games, things like that. So I don't think it's Cotter's decision, really. It's just what the coaching staff are putting him to.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Peyton's rotated Taumalolo and some of their other big minute forwards and Cotter in recent years, keeping them fresh for those big pushes. Another guy that sort of reminds me that in the last year or so was James Fisher-Harris. I mean, he's used to be the very big minutes, just one of the absolute best props in the competition. And now he's sort of being saved for finals a little bit more. And when we saw it, he absolutely killed it when Penrith needed it to him last year, but could have something similar with those Cowboys rotations.
Sorry, I'll just jump in there real quick. What I will say is if he starts hitting 70 to 80 minutes week in, week out, then I'd look, a lot closer at Cotter. But unless he's getting, 70 plus minutes every week, I just don't really see him being, in that upper echelon of the front row forwards, or especially not in the second row either.
Yeah, I probably have him at about 60 minutes a game and not really moving much from there. He had those random low-minute interchange games. I think some were injury affected, but it is a bit of a debate whether he keeps that a little bit more consistent. But I think you were talking just before we started, Realm. I mean, Dearden's also a captain, and he's in the halves. And I mean, he's the one really running the show.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like they're losing the likes of Chad Townsend, Lolo, players like that as well. Like they're still going to be in the field. They're still going to have a voice. They're still part of the leadership team, just not actually branded as the captain. So I'm not reading into that captaincy too much as news when it comes to Cotter's minutes.
Yeah, that's a fair point. All right. So we'll move on to the Knights now a little bit. There's a few people to talk about up in that sort of around that 500k mark in the second row position. First, I'll bring up Adam Elliott. I know there's been a couple of people around social media that have been hyping him up a little bit, and other people just really not as interested. Is there scope for him to do what he did at the back end of 2023 and a little bit of what he did in 2022 at the Raiders? Is there a world where he can do that, or is the rotation going to be a bit off?
I don't think much is going to change there personally. Like what people are saying that Kurt Mann's going to open up that role for Adam Elliott. They're just going to move Crossland into exactly the same role Kurt Mann was playing. I don't really see much difference at all for what's going to happen there. Like that role is not going to change at all. And we're talking about that the back end of last year when I think it was from round 20 onwards. That's when he started to see a little bit more minutes and got a bit more consistency, but he still only averaged 50 over that period. Like he had 4 games over 60 points, but he also had 3 games under 50. So I just no value there for me. Nothing that I'm looking into.
Yeah, that's fair. Any other guys at the Knights that interest you, Catfish?
Just on Elliott, I think maybe I hold a little bit more hope in that if he does get a bigger minute role. I think we saw even last year, we knew he came into the season injury affected, and then obviously after round 1, further injuries struck. So I don't think we really saw him healthy towards the back end. But when he did get, say, even 60 minutes or more, you saw him, you generally hit, close to 1 ppm, if not slightly over. So he can hit a 60 average, which would give him about 10 points unders on what he's currently at the moment. So it just comes down to minutes for me. I think he could get 60 to 65 on a weekly basis, but that back row is a little bit questionable. I mean, I know and maybe Dylan Lucas belongs in more of the center wing discussion since he's got that dual, but he's interesting because the word is he might be starting on that right edge with Frizzell apparently switching over to the left. So there's some interest there as well. But for the overall picture, I think you're really counting on Frizzell to, take those left edge attacking stats, right, that Lockie Fitz used to get. And, even Mitch Barnett back in the day when he was on that edge for 80 minutes. I do think, though, with Frizz's health, he's just, can find an injury. Don't want to use the word injury prone, but I think just the way he plays so hard, he does put his body into a lot of punishment. So that's my concern about starting with Frizz. I feel like, especially with so much hype over Kai Peace-Paul, I just feel like, even Baz Tui is reporting they want Pearce-Paul to actually start at some point, and he's probably going to take minutes off even Dylan Lucas from the start. Who knows? It's just too much unknown for me. I feel like there's other guys with a little bit more certainty that I'd probably lean towards.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Tui comments are actually pretty valuable with even somebody like Crossland and what his role was. He said, there's probably going to split some minutes with Brayley, and he'll also do the lock Kurtman role. So, as you said, literally just filling in exactly what Mann did last year. So, I think that there is more risk in Dylan Lucas than a lot of these other guys, and he's also a little bit more expensive. So, I'm personally happy to let him through to the keeper.
Yeah, for sure. I also don't really consider Dylan Lucas as a 2RF in Supercoach. Like if a player's 2RF center wing and they're going to be playing the forwards, I'm going to be playing him in my center wing. So I wouldn't even consider Dylan Lucas for my 2RF slots.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Somebody who inevitably pops up at least a couple times a year, particularly in preseason. Are we looking at Viliame Kikau? Can he have a bit of a bounce back? Is there going to be a tag, or is it just going to plod along and sort of do what he's done and not quite be who we want him to?
Well, I'll let you take that one.
Look, I have a lot of time for Billy Kicks as a Supercoach option. Like his game when he's on is, it's made for Supercoach, right? can score a try, has skills to offload and set up tries for other people around him, busts tackles for fun. Like he's got the Supercoach package. It's just, I don't know, he whether it's the move to the Bulldogs, he just hasn't found his mojo. Maybe it's the Bulldogs just not being able to use him yet. Like we didn't really see him settle into anything before injury struck, and then obviously he came into a really struggling Bulldogs team at the end. So I tend to think he definitely could. Like for him to average more than 46 is not going to take a lot. It's just you'd really want to see the Bulldogs improve as a team to be in those attacking areas so that he can show off those attacking abilities that he's got. But yeah, I tend to not feel as confident about the Bulldogs this year. So I'm going to give Billy Kicks a pretty wide berth, even though it is a very juicy price for someone with that potential.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same boat as well. I'm not really looking at Kikau. You'd have to bank on the Bulldogs as a whole improving, and with their forward pack, that's just on paper, it's one of the worst in the comp. The backs that they've added, Stephen Crichton, one of the most renowned ball hogs in the game. So if he's playing fullback, especially, no one's going to see the ball. So I just there is value in Kikau, just not enough compared to some of the other guys.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also just think that with the huge uncertainty around which forwards line up where, especially in the middles, which backline players end up where, who plays and not, I just don't think we're going to know what his role is and what he's actually going to do until it settles. And do we even know if it settles? Like, if somebody underperforms, we can just chuck the next guy in. Like, Sherry might play cup for a few weeks, and then if somebody goes out, it might change up again. So I really don't have a lot of confidence in him consistently having an appealing role for a long period of time. And until there is something that suggests that, I think I'll leave him.
And with Jamin Salmon sitting on the bench there as well as a utility, and they've got Preston on the other side who can bang out 80 minutes over a season. Like, it's just there's not enough there for me to warrant Kikau as an option.
Yeah, I agree with that. Somebody who probably will bang out a bit more consistency and is at a discount this year. We're finally getting to some of these guys who we've seen perform well in the past and either coming back from injury or just a really low year. We'll go with Beau Fermor. Now, Catfish, how much do you factor in that early buy versus how much value he has and that really nice early draw?
Yeah, look, I think we're still all probably figuring out the best way to navigate these early buys, right? So firstly, last year, having a crack at it, I took a couple of swings trying to think, I'm going to have certain players in my team that have early buys and I'll navigate that. And then other players where I want to start with them, but I will trade them out for other, cheapies and stuff like that before their second or third games, thinking that was going to be my strategy. So pretty mixed bag in terms of results. I feel like more often than not, I'm going to lean towards skipping guys, especially if they're not nailed on guns, who have those early buy rounds. So it does depend on position, obviously, and their price tag. But I feel like in the second row, there's so much value. There's so many good options that you could take a punt on as far as mid-rangers go. A lot of people around Firma's price that I don't think we need to. I feel like Firma, if anything, because he's got the round 2 buy, he's not going to change price for an extra round. It's almost perfect to take the punt on someone else and you get, 2 free looks at Firma. And if the guy you took the punt on fails, you're jumping across before Firma's price changes. That's kind of the way I'm looking to play on it. Having said that, I don't have an issue if you are going deep. Firma's your 3rd or 4th or 5th, even mid-range second rower. If you've gone that build, I think it's scary. But look, I can see some super coaches having a go at that. I actually don't think that's a bad idea either this year, the way it's looking. So, yeah, I think I'm going to skip Firma as much as I like him. A lot of it will come down to which side he's playing on. So if he's running off Curran Foran, I might feel a lot more confident that I will navigate that round 2 buy with him in my team. But if he's on the right side with Fifita staying on the left, then I might just I'll just wait and see how Firma looks before jumping on.
Yeah, Fermor for me, he is a definite option. He's on my short list, and he's probably been about 30 to 40% of my drafts that I've done, either as my 2RF 1 or 2. But it all depends basically down to whether or not I go Jaden Campbell or Fifita. Like I'm only going to have one Titan just because of that round 2 buy. So I would like a piece of that early draw, and obviously JC and Fermor and Fifita, they're all great attacking players. So if I don't have room for Campbell, it's probably likely I end up with a Fermor. But he's probably about third or fourth option-wise out of the 2RF mid-ranges for me.
Yeah, I'd probably put him there myself. That it is a good point about how many you can carry with these early buys, because, as you know, early season, our team's still working its value up, and our sort of 18th, 19th, 20th man aren't really that strong. So if we got more than that one, as you said, we start to risk getting 20s and 30s in our team for not much upside. All right. So next on the price list, we start to run into arguably the most debated 2RF position, Roosters edge. Are we going to get one? Are we going to get two? And who's it going to be? Do you have a preference as to what we might see, Realm?
Yeah, well, ideally, I think we'd all like to see Suya Wong and Angus Crichton get the edge spots, not just for value and Supercoach, but Suya Wong has the highest upside NRL-wise and Supercoach-wise out of probably any of the players there. Like the games he played last year, he played 8 games in total, but 4 of them were 50-plus minutes, and in those 50-plus minute games, he had about a 60 average. In the 2 games he played 80 minutes, he had almost a 60 base in both those games as well. So he has that huge potential there, almost like what Gus was a couple of years ago. And if we get that Gus back, and judging by the training pics that came out, I think today or yesterday, he was looking really fit and really determined to, get back to that old form. So if we can get him on the left and Suya Wong on the right, there's a case to honestly start with both of them.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see if they do start with that. Where would you reckon Nat Butcher moves to? A bench middle role in that case?
Yeah, I get unless there's a minute share on an edge, but that's another kind of downside to it, is that we don't know which edge is going to be playing 80, whether they both are, whether neither are. Like Nat Butcher could go on and cover both of them, so they're both only playing 60 minutes, and he's playing 40 off the bench with maybe some middle minutes sprinkled in. So that is the one risk of having those Roosters edges, just because it's such an unknown as to what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think especially the guys who are a little bit more of the expensive. Angus, he's down at, what is he, 409. We've got Wong at 460, and we've got Tupanua at 398. So Wong is the most expensive, but as you said, those stats, if he does get the minutes, look amazing. So I think I do agree that it could be Crichton and Wong. I think we might just see Tupanua on the bench or not at all. It's such a strong pack heading into this year. You've got your Terrell Mays firing up. You've got all these other guys just really revving up to push them a bit higher than they were last year. Do you have an opinion of where they might finish, Catfish?
Honestly, it's so hard to predict, isn't it? The Roosters pack, if they're all healthy, the problem is, like, I don't think there's anyone that really stands out that demands like 100%. I'm going to be the one who plays 80 minutes here, locked on. Like, I just don't think there is that guy right now in the Roosters. And it's not because they're bad. It's just there are so many that are good or like of a very similar high quality that it's okay for Trent Robinson to share it. So it is tough. Like I can see, I mean, if you think back to last year, right, we had a similar kind of situation with the Storm, right? They had Trent Liero and Elisa Katoa, basically 2 edge back rowers that you could have both, locked in from round 1 and you'd been happy. Trent Liero, he was disappointing, but he still made cash, basically, and gave you some decent scores early on, good enough for what you paid for him. So I think it would not be a surprise to see a similar situation, but also, what's the range of outcomes here? There's every chance that these guys, no one's playing 80 minutes, especially not early on. They could be getting 50 minutes, 60 minutes. And then, when you got Tupanua, who played some middle last year and then obviously came into grade, more of an edge back rower. Angus was playing middle and edge off the bench last year. Like, there's so many guys, and obviously Nat and Egan both played middle and edge. So all of them so versatile, all of them able to play 80 if they have to. I just can see it being an absolute nightmare, and we might just find everyone getting 50 minutes and then lots of rotations week to week. So yeah, I think definitely you want to take a punt on someone, but similarly, I could also see there's a viable strategy where you just skip them all and hopefully hit on the other mid-rangers. Like, let's say, all your Firmers and other guys, they go fine, and like you don't need to take the risk on the Roosters.
Yeah. Well, I reckon you could be bang on there. If we get them both, we could end up looking at two Loyeros who make us money, but kind of aren't as exciting. We've seen Angus average 70 in the past, but I don't think he'll do that again. I think he has big upside this year, but I don't think it's quite to that extent, especially with this pack. Wong, especially, does he only need 50, 60 minutes to be good value? Maybe. But yeah, I think we could be in for two Loyeros if we do end up getting both of them.
There could still also be a Katoa that just comes out and absolutely smashes it. And again, you're not upset that you got the other guy, but you're upset because you didn't get the one who really took off. I have no idea who that's going to be. You'd probably gamble on Wong, right, with the biggest upside. He's the youngest and shows a lot of promise. But I mean, Angus Crichton was playing for New South Wales not that long ago, so it's a wild situation.
Yeah, it's definitely a funny one. I currently have Angus there, but I might switch him to Wong just to have that more expensive guy, so I can solidify my team a little bit. All right, so the next one on the list is probably our Shaun Lane. Now, Lane's probably one of the guys on this list who is the most slam dunk. I won't call him flawless because there's rarely anything 100% guaranteed in the NRL or Supercoach, as we know. But look, he's averaged really well in the past, just had such an injury disrupted last year. It did mimic a little bit like a Cotter or an Elliott season where it just never got going. But we have seen him, especially in 2022, absolutely fire. And at his price of 446, we could be seeing well north of 600k in his future.
Yeah, no doubt. Shaun Lane I think he's the most owned player in Supercoach at the moment, and there's a reason for that. Like, there's potential for almost 20 points in value there with that early draw, Dylan Brown next to him. Like, there's really limited reasons for me, or almost minimal reasons as to why you wouldn't start with him. So I don't think he's the one you want to anti-pod. Some of the other guys, the 2RF guys that are pretty popular, are more likely to anti-pod, and you'll be way more successful for that.
Yeah. Any opinions on what I guess this full Eels team, because we had such disruption last year with Lane and Madison, and even some of the middles being out for extended periods. We never really got a good look at a fully fit Eels team. Catfish, how do you see that playing out for Lane in 2024? Is it going to have much of an impact?
I don't think so. For me, like when I look at that team, I think Shaun Lane's the best pure edge back rower, in that team. Like, yeah, absolutely. Hopgood is a gun, but he's not really meant to play edge. I think he's very clearly shown that lock forward is his best position. Madison is just such an impact off the bench, and I think for the Eels, that's actually his best role. Even though he can, he's obviously come through playing in the halves and playing on the edge, so he's got that versatility there, which again I think makes it very suited for a bench position. So to me, like, I think fully fit Lane's probably going to be playing 80 minutes pretty comfortably on that left edge, running off Dylan Brown. So yeah, it's hard not to, like, I just don't see what are you hoping for if you skip him, right? Like, at the very least, if he's healthy, he's probably going to deliver already 5 points above his price tag, and that's quite conservative. If he averages 50 playing 80 minutes on an edge, and then you throw in the pretty comfortable draw, no early buy, not till round 9, and then he covers 2 of the big buy rounds, like just lock him in and don't worry about it.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely can agree there. He's probably the safest pick out of all these mid ranges. someone, I think, as you said, his role as the dominant edge playing 80 minutes is probably pretty nailed on, especially given in that big interview Brad Arthur did a few weeks ago that he said Tuilagi might even be starting at some point over Bryce Cartwright. So we saw, I mean, Lane's just the guy to go for. There's not really much risk involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we'll move down to somebody who's also quite high upside, but we might not end up getting him. Realm, where do you think the Law's going to start on edge, or are they going to use him as a bench middle?
I think it's a case of like the Roosters, like these are the players that should be starting, but we're just unsure if they actually are. So I feel like Law should start left edge outside Munster. Loiero, I think there was rumours of him going to the bench and playing some more middle this year. But again, we won't really know until the trials in round one. But yeah, in theory, Law should be starting on the edge. It's just whether or not he actually does. And if he does, there's a pretty decent chance he starts on my team. I do rate Law. I think he's a solid player, and he fits that Melbourne work ethic. Like he's got that mongrel in him that they do like there, and he'll offer a lot more than Loiero can. And I think that'll show in the preseason camp.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's somebody who I think has a lot of upside. He just needs that role. Catfish is there. Do you think is there much discussion of how that Melbourne pack lines up, or it's really one of those two options?
Yeah, from what I have read, it seems like he is basically competing with Howarth and Chan for that left edge starting spot. Everything I've seen seems to point to Loiero moving into the middle off to the bench. So, yeah, like if he wins out in that spot, I feel like with the year Munster had, like I don't think he could go much worse than what he did last year for someone of his quality as a player. So I think that should mean if whoever's working with him on that left edge probably get a lot of opportunity. So yeah, I'm quite interested in Blore as well if he does get that starting spot. We've seen him have a lot of Supercoach relevance, not just in terms of hype, but when he's played big minutes on the field, he's shown his game to be quite Supercoach friendly, good work rate as Realm said, and obviously the tackle busting and offloads, that attacking ability is there as well. So that's obviously, I think it just comes down to, can he show that he's defensively more reliable than the other two that he's competing with? And if he does, then I think he'll start and hopefully he'll hit the ground running with that early draw.
Yeah, I think you're right on there. Is there any more to say about Blore, or should we keep moving on?
Now, the one thing I would watch out for is that they've upgraded Howarth to another contract where it's still another 500 grand a year. I think that's till the end of 26 or 27, and they've already pumped about $1.5 million into him, and they've just put another 2 million down on him. That's a lot of money to keep playing someone in reserve grade. So that's really what I'd watch out for. Even if Howarth starts on the bench in round one, he could definitely take minutes off Blore.
Yeah, I think. I agree that the off-field moves really seems to indicate that they have big plans for him, but I just haven't seen a lot to really convince me. Right, he seems like a guy who's afraid of contact. I don't think those guys generally last in the NRL. So unless he's really worked on that,
I think he's gotten a lot bigger. Like he's put, I think I've read somebody who's put on almost 10 kilos in the off season, and he has looked a lot bigger in preseason photos as well. So yeah, before I didn't think he would be a second row. I thought he'd be stuck out in the centers, but no, I think he's filling out a bit more now.
Yeah, well, I hope he lives up to the promise, because obviously there's been a lot of hype about him for multiple years now. But no, it's a really good point.
Yeah, it'd be a bit of a shame if he kept going on playing 2 or 3 NRL games a year at 500k. It's a bit not exactly somebody you want to spend your salary cap on like that. All right. So we'll move on to somebody next who we are a bit more certain about filling an 80-minute edge spot, and that's Brendan Piakura. Now, I quite like Piakura just because, well, we've seen him in the reduced role, just because of that certainty with all of this other up in the air stuff, especially with this Roosters back row Law and a couple of these other guys' minutes uncertainty. I quite like the security and safety there, but Realm, do you think there's enough upside there compared to some of these others?
No, I think I would take other players with their upside. Like we've talked about the likes of Bo Firm or Shaun Lane, even some we haven't mentioned yet, Brendan Piakura. I think there's more upside there.
Thought we just mentioned him.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. I mean, not Brendan Piakura. Who was I looking at? Sorry, Gus. That's who I was looking at. Next name below. Yeah, sorry, Angus Crichton. That's the ceiling there. I think would be higher. Brendan Piakura, still solid, but I would probably look at other guys as that safer ceiling.
Yeah, I quite like the safety, but as you said, does he have as much opportunity to be gun as some of these others who we know can do it? And Supercoach is all about attack. Catfish, where would you rank Piakura in your sort of order of preference? Do you have him around that sort of third, fourth, fifth one that you want to have in your team? Is he sort of floating around the fringes or just not quite considering?
I feel like his role is probably more certain, as you were pointing out earlier. I tend to think he's going to play 80 minutes. I don't think it's nailed on. There's a chance he doesn't, or whether he builds into it, because he's still quite young, obviously. I just feel that the minimum he's going to play is still, 55, 60 minutes. So it's a decent role regardless. I think running off Ezra Mam, obviously Reece Walsh, causing havoc. I think there's a lot of potential for attacking stats. And for me, I'm a Broncos fan through and through, and I've watched him very closely because I've been excited watching him come through, because it's been a while since we've had an effective line runner, at the Broncos. Like, that's not Ricky and Capel. Maybe early on he was, but it wasn't what he was last year. Whereas Piakura really brings that. He runs a great decoy line. He's got a lot of skills when he does get the ball. Like, his ball playing is not your typical edge back roller. So I'm really excited for him to develop further. So I think that can bring some attacking stats there. So I feel like he does actually have a little bit more of a ceiling. He's showcased a little bit. I think he had a one spike game or two spike games where he hit 70, 80 plus with some attacking stats in there. I think as he gets older and more fitter as well, I do think he's going to consistently hit more work rate than he did. There were times where I think when he started coming into an 80-minute role when Capel was injured, he looked tentative, like he wasn't sure how hard he should go because he wasn't sure he could get through 80 minutes where he was being asked to. You could tell as he did that once or twice, and then the third, fourth, fifth game when he did it, his work rate just went up. So I have a lot of excitement there for Piakura. Try not to think it's just because I'm a Broncos fan, but he's in my team at the moment.
Yeah. He is somebody that has caught my attention. I currently have him sitting as my tier F4, but it depends what I'm going to do with whether I bring in a Murray as someone a little bit more expensive. Because I think, Realm, you probably were a bit lighter on some of these guys, and I had about 4 or 5 of them in my team.
Yeah, I think I'm going to run a max of 3, but depending on if I start with a gun 2RF, then it'll probably be 2. Obviously, that's going to be TLT dependent. If we get some of the cheapies, like I'm hoping, I've got big hopes for Samuela Fainu. Hopefully, we get a Jack Howarth around there, a Matamua. Then someone like a Morgan Smithies, Kai Pierce-Paul, Tallis Duncan as my 2RF4. Especially at the moment, it's Smithies, just because I think he should start at lock the first couple of rounds while Horsburgh's out. But then, 2 or 3 mids on the field to start with, or a gun.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Someone who we're starting to get down a little bit towards the bottom of this price bracket, but some of the recent news might push his considerations up even more, and that's Josh Curran. Catfish, how high are you on Josh Curran with this Ryan Sutton news and this really kind of weak-looking dogs middle?
Yeah, definitely. He's in my team at the moment as well. I had him kind of there already as a tentatively there, but after the Sutton news, definitely he's moved up there. We've seen him be very Supercoach relevant. He just needs minutes and opportunity. He's got that opportunity, so I'm happy to roll the dice. I think, if he plays to his potential, I think he'll earn that your big minute lock roll, which we'd love to see, obviously. for someone of his ability and potential at a new club.
Yeah, we've seen some big scores from him when he was playing lock and even second row for the Warriors a couple of years back, but he dropped a fair bit off the bench last year. So if he can get back to anything close to that, I don't think he'll play 80, obviously, with guys like Curran possibly spelling him and in contention for that role. But I do think there is a lot of upside considering there's just not many other players. Realm, is there... What downside can you see for Curran, especially, I don't know, with Curran?
I can see him playing a similar role as what Adam Elliott does with Curran coming and filling the rest. Like there'll be some days where he's playing over 60 minutes, borderline 70 minutes, because he has that motor in him. But then there'll be other days where he's playing, less than 50. So I don't know if I can see the consistency in that Bulldogs team in the minutes in the pack. I don't think they will even know what's going to happen. Team G could be completely different 1 to 17 by round 5. So I just don't know if I can trust it enough to start with him. But he's cheap enough to be an easy buy come round 3, especially if one of the other mids or cheapies isn't going well. Easy switch.
Easy switch at his price. As you say, there's a lot of others around there. But at about that 400k mark, we start running out of options. We've already talked about Angus. We have talked about Tupanera a bit, and then it sort of drops off a little bit. Are there sort of anybody above that 350k price bracket that catches your eye? Like, I don't know, an Aaron Clark or a Palacia, if they manage to get a role in say starting lock, or it's just not really for you with just so many other options around?
Nah, I'm likely to miss out on Palacia. I don't see what everyone else is seeing with him as an option. Like he's got Tino, Mo Fotuaika, Isaac Liu, or Aaron Clark, like you mentioned, they're all going to be fighting for minutes. And obviously they've got the like Tino's who are going to demand big minutes. Fotuaika is going to demand big minutes. I just don't see the value there for Palacia.
Yeah. I don't love Palacia's PPM compared to some of these other options as well. So even if he'd need quite a large role in order for me to look at him, and I just don't know if I trust that, as you said, with Tino being such a dominant stat eater. All right. We've started to get a couple of questions in the chat. We'll bring up some of these related to the middles. Somebody who's sort of just above the price that we've just looked at. Is there any love for Jeremiah Nanai this year? He had a bit of a down year last year. His defense needed a bit of work. Do you think that there's potential upside if the Cowboys bounce back a little bit, or there's really a bit of a head scratching going on with Lukey and Finifuiaki and Luciano, just all sort of in contention for minutes in that spot?
Catfish, you want to start on this one?
I do think Nanai is a good potential pod to take a risk on. The Cowboys, their draw, I mean, they have no buys early on, and there's always potential there for Nanai. It's just about attacking stats, right? He finished the season really well, as some people have pointed out, and obviously that ruined his price tag for now. It is a little bit more than I'd like to take a punt on, especially with such good value underneath that price tag. But I certainly don't mind, starting with him as maybe even your most expensive guy, and then downgrading to some of the mid-ranges as you see whoever stands out from the pack as a strategy there. So I definitely don't mind the shout. I'm surprised we skipped Lukey. I thought he would be a decent.
That's what I was going to bring up as well.
I really like the look of Lukey for Supercoach and just for footy, full stop. If he's going to be starting an edge, I'm going to lean his way just because of the price tag. Like he's 110, 120k cheaper than what Nanai is, and you could get very similar output as well. And I think he's going to be running off Dearden, so I'd much prefer that that option.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in the same boat there. I think if Lukey's starting left edge and Leilua moves to a middle rotation, I definitely would look to Lukey, because even last year in the games he played over 50 minutes, which I think was about 7 games, he averaged over 60 points. So he has that. He's got that high ceiling. He's got the good base. And if you're really looking for someone around that Nanai price mark, about 570, a little bit upwards, I'd look to probably go Cam Murray or even Tyson Frizzell. Or they're Podge out and Cam McInnes as well last year. I know we'll touch on guns a little bit later, but Cam McInnes I'm quite high on because he's got a great average when playing above 45 minutes, and he only played under that 6 times to start the year. So, yeah, I definitely would look elsewhere around that price mark. I think you can find better value and better hope for a gun to hold throughout the year.
Yeah. So what do you think the early rotations might look like for the Cowboys? Who do you have playing 80 out of, I guess, Leilua, Lukey, and Nanai? Catfish, do you have any particular that you would think has the front running for that?
Yeah, I think it'd be Nanai. He's shown definitely the more consistency playing 80 minutes there. It just, looking at Lucy, the training pictures, it seems like he's maybe bulked up to play middle, potentially a little bit more there. So I think ideally that's the role they want to have. I feel like Peyton's probably realized that when Lucy's playing 80 minutes, his defense is questionable at best, to put it that way. So, yeah, I think that's probably he'd prefer to keep Lucy more for impact as opposed to putting me out there for the minutes. I think Lukey, it's just he hasn't had the opportunity to play 80 minutes consistently yet because of injury mostly. So if he can stay healthy, yeah, I definitely see him being at least 10, 15 points undervalued from what his starting price would be.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Somebody else we might have missed, especially from being burnt last year. John Smith was saying, is there any love for Schuster as well? We saw in 2021 he had some very good points, averaged about 60 at the back row. Catfish, can you go back to Schuster after what he did to us last year?
No, thank you. I could not. And it's also because Luke Brooks, he doesn't use his back rower very well from what I've seen. Like maybe it's like you look at what happened to Isaiah Papali'i, just Brooks is not, I don't know whether it's just timing or maybe striking that combination. He's never really struck a combination with his back rower to give him attacking opportunities. So yeah, no, that's a big no for me and Josh Schuster.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. I just think that I think I've even heard that potentially Burbo might have been giving him a run for his money to start the season at some point. But I mean, they're paying him a lot of money. You'd expect him to be there, but there are just so many options. Have we got any other questions before we move on to the next bracket? Oh, someone right down the bottom. Is there any love at all for Tom Eisenhuth potentially going into that second row spot for the Dragons, or do you think that there's just not much upside there?
I wouldn't really be discussing him with 2 RFs. He's a dual centre wing. If he's starting the back row, put him in his centre wings. Don't consider him for your 2 RFs.
Yeah, it's pretty done and dusted. All right. Any other shouts in this sort of price bracket? How long are we going? About 40 minutes. We could probably squeeze some of the others in. Any of the others in this price bracket? You brought up Lukey. Is there anyone else that you might be looking at, or not really without going up or down?
None real more that I'm looking at. The only one we hadn't really talked about, we talked a bit about the Cowboys pack, but there's Jason Taumalolo. But again, with that duel, I probably would look to rather start him at my front row than the second row. Other than that, there's no one else I'm really keep my eye on.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so we might quickly go over some of these cheapy options and guns. We've about 40 minutes in. We should be able to finish it off. We'll go down to the first one under 350k. We've 2 at the exact same price. We've got Morgan Smithies and Kai Pearce-Paul. We'll just go back to Pearce-Paul for a little bit. We've discussed the Knights a little bit, but Realm, Tui's comments about him wanting him to start at some stage. Do you reckon that's going to happen round 1, or are they going to ease him into it?
Originally, there was talk that he wasn't going to be ready for round 1 at all. Now it's come out that he's probably likely to see some time in the trials. So I would be surprised if he's starting round 1. I have him off the bench in my predicted round 1 teams, but it's not going to be enough to warrant starting him, especially off the bench, like with assuming Dylan Lucas starts on the edge. So probably one I'd look to pick up once he's starting, but not coming off the bench to begin. I think there's other options around that price that we'll talk about that with much better value to start the year with.
Yeah, Catfish, similar thoughts, or have you got
pretty much
any other things?
The excitement seems to be quite high from the Knights about him. It's just whether he's physically ready to go. It definitely seems like at some point he's going to take that starting role. Whether that translates to 60 minutes or even 80 minutes, like that's a later season thing. But he's at that price tag. It's not like he's super cheap that you need to start early. Put him in the team. I think you can definitely look to move him in if he's taking the starting role and showing that he's belongs in the NRL. So, he won't be in my round one team.
Yep. All right. Someone who's the same price as Kai Pearce-Paul, 345k. Morgan Smithies. Now, there's a solid chance that he can start for the Raiders while Horsburgh suspended, but what does his role look like after that? Catfish, do you think there's room for Smithies to be someone that's Supercoach relevant?
I mean, I tend to think no. Ricky Stewart is not a fun coach for Supercoach purposes, especially when it comes to his forwards. And with the Horse coming back in round 3, it's not enough time for Smithies to establish himself to deserve more minutes, I think. And I'm definitely giving him a wide berth. if after Horsburgh comes back and he's still got a big role and he's still cheap enough that you could downgrade any of your fouled mid ranges to him. So that's the way I'd look at it. But I'm not holding up a lot of hope that he's going to be Supercoach relevant early in the season anyway.
Yeah, I think to that Smithies point, I'm going to go devil's advocate and disagree there. I think to begin the year is when he's going to be most relevant, unless we see injuries throughout the year, which obviously we can never predict. But to start, I would say that he's probably the lock to begin with the first few rounds. And he's got a huge motor in him. And just going really roughly based off the Super League stats, I had his average Supercoach points in Super League for 2023 as a mid-50s, about 55, 56. So I know translating to NRL is going to be very different, but there's definitely value there to begin the year compared to guys like Kai Pearce-Paul and a certain Rabbitohs back rower who's probably going to start off the bench to begin the season. I would rather start with Smithies, even if he starts the first 2 games, then goes to the bench. There's going to be more value there than those 2 other guys to begin.
Yeah. All right. So we might as well talk about that one in question. We've got Tallis Duncan. 321k. We've sort of started hearing that he might be playing a bit more of a lock role behind Cameron Murray, and Murray might be going off and playing a bit of edge to preserve himself. Does that put a pin in his relevancy for this year unless things change?
I wouldn't say for the year. He's definitely going to have a role on that team. I can see him definitely getting a starting job there, probably in the back row, and then moving someone like Arrow to the middle, or dropping someone like Jacob Host, Cheekham, because he is basically the future of that side alongside Cam Murray. Playing lock last year, I think in the 4 games he played over 30 minutes, in which he averaged 35 minutes a game, he scored 48.2 Supercoach points. So that's just his potential is just completely unlimited. Like the sky is high for him. Once he gets that starting role, he should be 100% owned.
Yeah, definitely. Somebody, were you going to say something, Catfish?
I was just going to say, I do think that's a little bit skewed. He's got a line break try and a pretty small sample size. So that 48, if you take that line break try out, it does drop a little bit. I'm maybe not as bullish. I mean, the potential is absolutely there, but I'm going to have to wait and see something, significant minutes wise before it's not cheap enough, I don't think, to take that risk.
Yeah, fair. Well, we'll go back up a little bit. Someone that's probably more in discussion of front row forwards now, but with the duel, we'll quickly touch on him. Liam Knight. Does the Ryan Sutton news give him a little bit more security, do you think? Where do you see his minutes at Realm?
Not enough to be relevant. He probably gets around that 40-ish minute mark, but I think that's the Sutton news is more going to help the likes of Sam Hughes or Max King. I just don't really rate Liam Knight as others do. I don't see enough value in him for me to start compared to other guys. So yeah, that's one that's going to be a miss from me.
Yep, I'm on the same page there. Just he's too inconsistent. Like, yes, there's games where he suddenly really turns up, but then there's too many where he just disappears and does too many stupid things because just I don't know, doesn't seem to have the footy IQ sometimes. So and look, we can't forget Gus Gould did pick Sam Hughes to be his Preston-like bolter for the season, so can't forget that hype train there.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
no,
they've got big minute guys in the forwards already as well. Like they've got two pretty much close to 80-minute edges. Josh Curran can play big minutes, whether he's at lock or in the middle or a front row. Kurt Mann off the bench there to cover the rest of that. And Max King's capable of playing big minutes as long as he's not injured. And they've got other guys that can fill those slots as well. So I just don't see enough relevancy for Liam Knight to be in my team.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. It's sort of a team that feels really weak, but there's still those big minute guys taking minutes, and it's sort of easy to forget that sometimes. So I think you could be right on with that one. There's not too many around this next little price bracket. I'm more interested in sort of jumping down to where we're getting to around basement now. Is there anyone between about, say, 250k and up that you'd really look at unless they get an unexpected starting role? Like maybe a Kobe Hetherington if he's for some reason starting?
Yeah, if they somehow move him to the lock and carry him in the front row, he's definitely should be a purchase. Another one that's sort of similar, Ryan Couchman, if there's whispers he gets the edge spot at the Dragons. I don't think he will, especially early season, but on the off chance he does, then he's definitely someone to have in your starting team.
Yeah, good shout. Bent Turbo's also there, but he's very scary at the best of times. He's taking following in his brother's footsteps with those hamstring injuries. So I just don't love him, even if he does start. It's so hard to go back to him.
And he'd be in your center wing, even if he did, right? Because he's got that duel still.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Samuel Fino as well. That's one guy that it's the Tigers round one buy is really annoying just because we won't know exactly how they're lining up. But he's a solid chance at the edge. At worst, I think he'll be off the bench. Like they're paying a lot of money for him for a guy that's only played 5 NRL matches, same as his brother. But I think his brother will need a little bit more time. But Samuel Fino, I predicted him to be a pretty solid Supercoach player, and just with the pedigree of the Tigers, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a crack early doors.
Yeah, it's a tough one because there's a couple of those fringe options with that round one buy. It makes it really hard to start with any of them. There could be a few really good value. It's just hard to know which ones it's going to be until we know.
Yeah.
Okay. Any of these Raiders bench options interest you with Horse out early? It's just not enough. Like Trey Mooney or anybody like that?
I think Trey Mooney could be quite Supercoach friendly if he gets the minutes and opportunity. So him and Peru both showed something at the end of the year, but it's Ricky Stewart. It does my head in. I can't take the risk.
Yeah, and last year Mooney exclusively played prop in New South Wales Cup. He didn't play lock at the edge where he'd been known to play before, where people expected him to be. So I think they might be looking to move him to that Papali'i overtake once Papali'i's legs are basically done. So that's why I don't think his time will be this season.
Could be one to mark down the black book for a year's time or two. Yeah, as we discussed, the Storm back rowers, someone's going to be there, and if it's Chan or Howarth, they will make a lot of money if they stay there, and there's not much more to say about them.
Would you consider Howarth if he was on the bench? Like, would you have him as a 2RF6?
If there's no one else better. It's hard to knock back someone that cheap with, somewhat, some semblance of security and, potential chance of taking a starting role if there's an injury or whatever. So, yeah, there's not a lot of cheapies potentially in the second row, but there also could be suddenly, 3 or 4 even if the cards fall the right way based on some of the projected potential starters that we're hearing whispers about. So I would never write him off, but if there's genuinely no one else that's starting and you need someone to be a second rower, he's as good as anyone else basically, right?
Yeah, because there's a chance we have 3 or 4 of these guys start on the bench round 1, round 2 with like Matamua, Cartwright, Sam McIntyre, even Mav Gaia, players like that. Like, there's a chance we have 4 or 5 of these guys start on the bench. Like, is there any that you would lean towards, or you're expecting to have the biggest role sooner rather than later?
That's a good question because, again, with like Matamua, I just don't think you can risk it with round 1 buy for the Tigers. So again, it's someone you keep in your back pocket for potential downgrade if after 2 or 3 weeks he's still got showing good minutes and cutting it on the field is probably the biggest question there. If he's showing that he's got a role in that team and will stay there, then he's a prime downgrade option later. So that's someone I'd keep Matamua for. I mean, Jed Cartwright, obviously from the Knights, he's got that centre wing duel as well.
Yes.
So again, you're probably looking at him in the centre wing if we don't get enough centre wing cheapies as well. Yeah, it's a really tough one, isn't it? Because there's, bench edge back edge back rowers are generally not great for Supercoach, right? Because they get like 10, 15 points in 20, 25 minutes or whatever. So they're prime nightmare. Exactly. But there's also the chance if they got some attacking outside, they crash over. I still think of, a number of years ago, James Fisher-Harris was that edge back rower just on the bench there. And I took the punt and he earned that role and became a starter and was great for my team. Crashed over for a double and made a buckload of cash. So it's a while ago now.
Yeah, well, there's a chance we'll get probably one of Matamua or Fainu, but I mean, we could also just have Pol at lock or something like that and just not get either of them. So it's hard to chuck one of those Tigers there for round 1, particularly with that buy. But there's a couple of options. All right. Well, we touched on Maverick Gaia and a couple of these fringe bench guys. Is there really anybody other than those that you want to discuss before we jump all the way back up to the top?
I don't know about genuinely discuss, just ones that maybe add to your black book. There's Viliame Fifita. He's likely to get a run at St. George this year. He's absolutely massive bloke, and he's got the dual front row forward as well. So one that you could potentially start with if you're looking to run one sort of nuff to start the year. I know a lot of people don't like that. They want their 25 players playing to begin, but if you are happy to run one nuff, then he's probably the guy to go for in your 2RF or front row forward. And the other one's, I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, Zion Mayu from the Warriors. Few people have him in their projected sides for the Warriors this season. He had a really good year in New South Wales Cup last year. So, yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on. And he's a smoky for round 1 as well.
Yeah, great name. We'll be keen to see if he pops up at some point. All right, how are we going? We might as well go up to the top quickly now. And, well, it's really the 2 Titans guys that are the main discussion points. Is there any chance that any you guys will start with one of either Fifita or Tino?
For me, it'd be Fifita only. That would be my consideration. I don't see myself risking Tino just like new coach, Des Hasler. We've seen what he's done to his lock forwards in the past. Rest in peace, Jake Travojevich's Supercoach relevance. Yeah, so I think surely Des won't do that to Tino, but the risk that he could do it, it puts me way off. And I think with Fifita, it's just he was so far ahead of every other back rower last year that he has to be at least considered for your team, even with the round 2 bye, especially with those early. Rounds 1, 3, and 4 are so good for the Titans, right? So it's definitely a consideration. At the same time, I really want to know which edge he's on, because if he's on the right again, no thanks. Not getting Fifita running off Tanner Boyd compared to Kieran Foran.
They were high school teammates, so who knows? That connection could soar Boyd up the charts.
Yeah. It's sort of hard to nail down a projection for them. I mean, with that early start, he could average 100 over those games, or just not do a lot. Especially if he's running off Tanner Boyd.
Fifita's one I am strongly looking at. It's just whether or not money permits it.
Got to be watching those Titans trials very closely, that's for sure.
And I think he's only just started running again after his latest injury, only like in the last week or two.
Yeah, hard to know if that explosiveness is going to be fully there, but I mean, that's what trials are for, hey?
Yeah, he's likely up against Tom Eisenhuth in round 1.
Oh, so. It's going to be, it's going to steamroll him. It's going to be over.
Yeah.
But yeah. Is there sort of anyone among those, I guess that sort of next top bracket that interests you for you? We had Hopgood with an absolutely insane year, but I mean, we've got Fit Eels, Piakura with lots of try scoring, Yo doing what Yo does. Is there any interest in any of those, or maybe Nola Kawatu, or just not really at their price point?
I've looked at Nicara just because of how good the Sharks' early draw is, and none of the centre wings really interest me. Like they've got such good run. Like they've got New Zealand first, and the Dogs, Tigers, Canberra. So that's round 2 to 4 are debatably the 3 best teams to come up against. Maybe just missing out on St. George. So that early run, I just wanted another piece of that Sharks attack other than Hines. And Nicara was one I have looked at, but it's just I don't know if we're going to have much value in him with that 70 average already. So that's the only thing that's stopping me from it. Like he had no injury games to say that he had any less. He had, I think, 1 or 2 sin bins, which is the only thing that really comes into his favor value-wise. But yeah, I think at that price, I may as well just try and find the extra 100K and go up to Fifita or save my money.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. There's sort of some upside for some of these other guys, but really not as much interest in me until I get down to Elias Katoa. Is there any interest from those guys, Carrigan or Sorensen, for example? I don't see as much interest in them compared to Katoa.
No, personally, I don't have interest in Katoa either, just because of that early draw, like that Penrith first up, New Zealand, Newcastle, and then the bye. So I am trying to stay away from Storm players. To be honest, the only one I'm really looking at early doors is Blore, just because of his value.
Yeah, there's a few relevant ones. Catfish, are you looking? How many Storm are you sort of looking to carry in your team? Have you got one sitting in there? Or you're avoiding all completely?
Just got Harry Grant and maybe Sean Blore, but again, depends if the other mid-ranges show up, basically. So, like Blore, potential-wise, I think he's really up there. But, yeah, again, trying to navigate those early buys. I'm just, locking in Harry, and probably that's about it at this stage.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Someone who I've had, out of these top options, I've probably had more interest than most of the others, and that's Cameron Murray. I think that there's not complete certainty over what his minutes are going to be. Does he play more minutes just with a reduced workload at edge, or does he sort of get similar but move to edge? Either way, I think that if the Rabbitohs go better and he can pick up some of those attacking stats, because he dropped off a bit with them last year, there is a bit of a bounce back factor to Murray. Do you think there's a good case for starting with him, Realm?
Yeah, absolutely. Like in most of my drafts where I've had a Tour F1 who's been above 600K, Murray has been that guy most of the time. It was either Fifita or Murray as my gun to RF. There's value of up to probably 10 points there. Like he averaged only 62 last year. He had the 1 injury game, so that if you take out that, he averaged 64. But years before that, he averaged 71, 70, and that was with injury games in that as well, where realistically he averaged 75 if you're taking that out. So yeah, there's definitely value there. We just need to get that form back. And that attack last year dropped off hugely. If we can find that again, I know with the reignited Rabbitohs team, who should be back in the top 4 mix, I think that will come into Murray's score.
Yeah.
I kind of see it almost the other way in some respects, because I think a lot of what Murray's drop-off is because Jamie and Cook didn't quite have the same level of attack that he had, last year compared to 2022. Obviously, Cook and Murray were very tied together in terms of their attacking stats, because it usually was Cookie putting it on for Muzz. So if the Rabbitohs end up wanting to attack more through their backline, I mean, that left edge, especially if Kaloa Matangi potentially moves over to that left edge as well. Cody Walker, Kaloa Matangi, Whiten, and then obviously Latrell swinging around as well, and obviously AJ finishing it all off. Like that's a lot of points potentially on offer in that left side. Yeah, and I think that's probably the one question I have, whether the Bunnies do decide they want to, just keep it simple with the forwards, get a roll on, and then let the backline do all the work. So, yeah, I don't really have the answer to that. I definitely agree that if I am paying up in the back row, Murray is definitely one of the options. Counting on the bounce back, like he can't really go much worse. Basically, I can't see that if he's going to get big minutes. It just comes down to do the Bunnies attack a little bit more through their forwards, or is it just going to be more of the same as last year, basically?
Yeah, it is an interesting point, because if they do it was sort of a little bit like that for the Cowboys at the back end of the last season, I feel, with Drinkwater dominating. But it will be interesting to see how some of those guys do get affected. I personally have had Murray in and out. I just can't figure out whether to get him or not. I think it's going to depend on what other money is going to be available in round one for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Someone that's not going to be in our round one teams for sure, but possibly be relevant a bit later on. How do you see Corey Horsburgh backing up from last year? He had a really good run from sort of just before Origin 2 towards the end. Do you think there's a little bit of value there to be picked up later on, or there's just not as much potential to be one of these top options we finish the year with?
Wilf, do you want to take that one?
I mean, do I have to mention Ricky Stewart's name again?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say as well.
Look, to be honest, I think with Corey Horsburgh, like he had a breakout year for Supercoach, and he was pretty good on the field as well. But if you translate it, like he was only the 12th best, in terms of total points in the second row position. I think if you break it down, I think average wise across the season he was like 18th in the position. So I just don't see him as a premium in the second row, and he's obviously lost that dual position, I think, for this year, right? So that just he doesn't have that ceiling that I would be looking for in my second row. He's no Dave Fifita, or not even Dave Fifita light. Like he was averaging more than 20 points less than Fifita. So I just can't see a spot later in the season.
Yeah, and they've got those new recruits in the four pack now with Smithies and Hosking, things like that. So even with Whitehead in his last year, Papali'i going downhill with age, they've got those replacements there. So yeah, just a Trey Mooney coming up, Puru, like we mentioned before. I just don't see how that role is going to open up hugely for Horsburgh. That's going to push him to that 70+ average that you'd want from your 2 or F1.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. Someone that you brought up before, and who we know can be an absolute base stat machine when he's given the opportunity, Cameron McInnes, sitting at pretty much exactly at that 600k mark. Is he somebody that can get back to close to that gun status, or not really while Finucane's in the team? Realm, have you got...
I think he still can while Finucane's in the team. It just last year because when I work out the value, or trying to work out the value in players, I will discount the games where they play lower minutes, whether it's through injury, return from injury, things like that. So last year, McInnes played 22 games, but 6 of them were under 45 minutes, and that was at the start of the season, back from injury, and then another couple of games where he got injured during the game. And so if you take out those 6 games, he averaged 65 points. So that's with 56 base. I think he can easily sustain 50+ minutes week in, week out. Obviously, we can't tell the future and see if there's going to be injuries, things like that. But if he's consistently pumping out 50+ minute games, he can definitely average that 65 to 70 mark, because there'll be some weeks where he's playing close to 80 minutes and other weeks where he's dropping back to 50. But that will, iron themselves out with the average. So yeah, that's what I'm strongly looking at to start with my tour F1. And his ownership's less than 1% at the moment, so he could be a huge pod. Especially he's not scared of getting some attack either. Like he can jag a try and something, and with that early draw, it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, Catfish. Do you see the Sharks starting Cameron McInnes at the 13 to start the year?
I honestly don't know. They could, but I tend to think I think they appreciate Dale Finucane's leadership, on the field and off the field. So to me, I don't think he's going away, not until he's definitely. I mean, look at how long Wade Grant lasted, right? So I tend to think they will keep trotting out Finucane as much as they can until, the downside of Finucane being on the field reaches Wade Graham kind of levels at the back end of his career. So that's my hesitation. Look, if I was coaching the Sharks, I would be starting McInnes, but obviously I'm not.
Yeah, I would love to see him go back to those high scores of yesteryear. We've enjoyed them when they've come in snippets over the last little bit. Somebody who does have that big ceiling, or at least has in past years, might have potential for a bounce back if they're on the correct edge. Isaiah Papali'i, is there any love for him at all, Catfish, or it's just not really somebody you can look at with that round one bye?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I will obviously watch him closely, but unless I see something significant, I'm not. Look, I'm not writing off the Tigers. I think they will improve this year. I like a lot of what Benji's kind of doing culture-wise, with some of the, and obviously off the field, there's big positive changes there. But I just don't know if it's this year that it starts translating. So yeah, I love Ice. I'll watch him closely, but I'm not getting my hopes up basically. So he's one to keep an eye on. Maybe for draft you could sneak him late because he might drop down value wise, but no, just not on the board for Classic, not for round one anyway.
Yeah. Any thoughts on IPAP realm, or pretty much just leave until we see?
Oh, look, if he comes out round 2 and 3 and bangs out 70 pluses with 60s in base and power, then easy pick up round 4. Like, would happily make the switch. But until we see it, I'm not going to go near it.
Yep. Someone I probably skipped over because I wanted to talk about IPAP. If Keon Kolomatangi does move to that insane-looking Rabbitohs left edge, how high do we think he can go? I mean, he averaged 61 last year, and the Rabbitohs had a pretty down year. Is there scope for him to push up into that gun category?
I personally don't like the moves to the left edge for him, Supercoach-wise, because the amount of options they had out there compared to on the right, like he was a main target, him and Campbell Graham on that right edge. Whereas on the left, he's going to have to fight the likes of Latrell Mitchell, who loves the left, Cody Walker himself, Jack White and Alex Johnson. Like, that's so many more mouths to feed on that side, where Keon's probably going to be the best block runner in the game, but I don't think he's going to get his hands on the ball as much. Yeah, I just don't see it.
Yeah. Do you reckon that'll cancel him out a bit more, Catfish, or do you think it might benefit him?
I tend to lean towards it having more upside. I think he continues to get better every year, and I think he could go to another level working with someone like Cody Walker as opposed to Lockie Ilias. So that probably is where the upside lies for me, just knowing that, your halves partner can actually use you properly probably makes a big difference.
Is Walker known for using his second rowers though? Like, I don't have the stats, or I'm even just thinking back, like, how effective is he with using his second rower?
I mean, if you're talking actual stats, I wouldn't be able to trot those out either. But just watching the eye test, like, you can tell he knows when to time his pass, as opposed to, not to crap on Lockie Ilias, but look, I just don't think he's that. Like, I don't think he can cut it in NRL first grade long term. So I feel like that's moving to the left can only be a benefit ultimately for Keon. So I actually kind of like him as a pod if, like, he's a little bit cheaper than Cam Murray. He seems nailed on for 80 minutes when he does get to play. And, if he does move into the middle at times, like he was last year, like, he just pushes his base up. So, I honestly don't mind it.
I think there's another 2RF who's around the same price, also moving to the left, that I'd prefer. Just put it up here. Yeah, the Tyson Frizzell, like the news that he's moved to the left now. Look at Lockie Fitzgibbon last year. Like there was, besides taking out the injury games, he averaged about 67 on that left edge, and that's Lachlan Fitzgibbon. He's now in the Super League. Like that should really say it all.
I feel like it's a little bit harsh on Lockie Fitz. I mean, if he was good at one thing, it was running lines and scoring tries on that edge, because he was really good at it. Like there was a lot of other questionable stuff that he didn't do so well, which is why he's not in the NRL. But one thing he really was good at was those lines that he ran. And yeah, I don't know if Tyson Frizzell is going to be as effective in that same way, if I can put it that way. But for me, like I said at the start, I just think it's more the injuries. Like it just seems to be always catching up with him. I will definitely take the punt and draft, but I'm not sure I want to risk it in Classic.
Yeah. We're sort of coming to the end of these premium options. There's not as much to pick out. Are there any other high 500, low 600 guys you're sort of looking at? Like we touched on Nanai briefly. We just went to Frizzell then. Hudson Young's had stretches, but I just don't think the Raiders are going to go up this year. Anyone else that you're looking at, Catfish, at all in that bracket?
Not really. I think it's really going to be Fifita, maybe Murray, Kalomatangi, one of those two. And then, yeah, just mid-ranges. I could definitely see myself running with just a bunch of mid-ranges, depending on how the money falls in the other positions. So, yeah, I don't see myself really wanting to... Like, there's just so much value in that mid-range, right? And there's so many good options that could present, 5-10 points of value. So, to me, that's always been the way I played. I'm going to premium in positions where there's no good value options and just risk it in the other spots there. So, yeah, that's kind of, I mean, you sometimes make the exception when you've got someone like a David Fifita, but there's still enough question marks about him where I'm not locking him into my team. If all the right pieces fall into place, like, again, stay on the left edge, looking really fit and healthy, despite the disrupted preseason, then I'm all for it, because there's no one else in that back row that can touch what Fifita can do. So, yeah, that's where I'm at, basically.
Yeah. Anyone you're considering, Realm, or it's sort of Cam Murray maybe, Fifita maybe, and then mid-ranges?
Pretty much. That's the area that I'm really in. The one that I had a little look at that we didn't really talk about was Jack DeBellin, but again, with that front row duo, I probably would rather him in the front row. But yeah, I think we've covered pretty much all the options that I had on my list.
I do think Hopgood probably deserves a little bit more love, maybe because he had such a breakout season last year and he's worth priced at such a good price, such a high price already. He's not, getting a lot of attention because, yeah, when you can pay up maybe like another 80 grand and you got Fifita, I can understand that. But I feel like Hopgood could be going a little bit under the radar as far as, a round one option goes.
Well, yeah. How many tries did he score last year for them? It was like 1 or 2. Do you think that
he had 4 tries and 4 try assists?
Yeah, okay. Is there scope for him to do all right with that early draw, you reckon?
I mean, the tries he got last year were against it was against Canberra, Manly, the Dolphins, and Melbourne. So a mix of top 8 and bottom 9 teams. And even with the try assists, he got 2 against the Sharks, 1 against the Knights, and 1 against the Dolphins. So I think he's one of those matchup-proof players, because in the games against the tough teams, he can jag an attacking stat and he will get 60 in base. And in saying that, he'll probably get around the same base against those less hard sides. So, yeah, I think early draw, hard draw to begin the year, you'd look at him the same way.
Yeah, that's a fair point. All right. I think that just about wraps us up, guys. Any final thoughts you'd want to say for the TRFs, or personal ways you're going to attack this position? Catfish, I think you've expressed that you're going towards the mid-ranges. Realm, you've kind of gone to a bit cheaper. Is there any more risk to one versus the other, you reckon?
I think the way I'm doing is probably more risk, because, if Catfish is running 5 mid-ranges, 4 to 5 mid-ranges, that probably 3 of them will hit, and the other 2 he can downgrade to a cheaper option. I just got to hope with mine that I've hit, like if I'm starting with 2 or 3 mid-ranges, that I'm picking the right ones. So I would say it's probably riskier starting my way, but at least I know with my way, I'm probably going to start with a gun 2 RF, so I know I'll have those points locked in. I mean, either way it works because, you'll end up with the right players by the end, hopefully.
Yeah.
I don't mind the risk if you're going to, chance it at in the second row, as long as you've built up your team that you can, rely upon it in other areas. You're not having to put out fires in those spots, basically. So it's ultimately about team balance. We know there's no way, one single way of playing and winning Supercoach. So with so many trades with boosts, like even if you get it wrong from round 1, it usually only takes you a couple of rounds to potentially flip your team and get the right balance right. It's just obviously how quickly you react and how good your judgment is in terms of what you need to fix and what's a little round 1 blip as opposed to I've made a huge mistake type areas.
Yeah. Well, the likelihood of all 5 of your mid-ranges firing and going to average 60, 65 plus is almost 0. So, you're going to have to put out a fire eventually. I think with the route that I'm taking, I just have to hope that I pick the right ones and I don't have to use any trades there. Whereas, if you're starting with 5 mid-ranges, you will likely have to use a trade there. You'll be forced to at some stage. So I just got to hope I get it right, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, spending up on one of those other guns, as you said, you're considering picking, that also helps you put out fires. Say if Fifita does start off averaging 100 with that early draw, you can get up to him a little bit more easily. Probably the last one we'll probably discuss for tonight. Adam Thompson's just chucked in the chat real quick. No love for Olakuatu. Is there scope for him to do well with a fully fit Manly team? Or is he just... Do we not quite know how it's going to work with Luke Brooks in the team?
If he didn't have that 180 score to finish the year, he'd be a lot better looking. But that just boosted his price. I don't want to buy him at 700k.
I honestly don't mind him as a pod. Like if you are going to pay up and risk him as a point of difference, like he's no worse than anybody else. Like he doesn't have the easiest draw, and then there's the unknown of obviously the Vegas trip, what that's going to mean. But yeah, look, if you're talking about Olakuatu or Kaloa Matangi or whatever, like there's not a huge difference in terms of pod factor and upside there. It's just obviously, as you said, Realm, almost 700k. It's a pretty steep price. But
I think at that price, you'd look to get Nikora, who's 10 grand more, and he's also owned by half the people. So I think, and with that Sharks early draw, I'd rather lean Nikora.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, everybody. That'll probably do us for tonight. Any final thoughts on this position overall, or pretty much time to wrap up?
Good luck.
Yeah, it's pretty much like that, isn't it? So many different ways you can attack this position.
Just pick your guys. Pick the guys that you actually want to watch and have fun with. And this is the ones where you just got to back your gut because the narratives are all there, right? And where we can outline the stats and stuff like that. But there's no one that's nailed on except for maybe Shaun Lane. That like everyone else is up for grabs basically. Lane's the only one at that mid-range option that I would skip early on.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the variation in teams because sometimes we do have these cookie cutter teams that everybody owns, and I think I haven't seen this much variation in position for a while, so I'm really keen to see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everyone. Yeah. All right. We're an hour and 20 in. We've covered all angles, a million players. That'll probably do us for tonight, everybody. Thanks for joining in. If you've joining the live stream on YouTube, where the Supercoach NRL Supercoach Hub, please like and subscribe if you've stayed for this long. This will go up on YouTube and audio on Spotify a bit later. And if you want more discussion on this or other positions or just Supercoach in general, make sure to join the Supercoach Hub on Discord for lots of news and constant discussion. Linktree will be in the description of our bio. And thanks, Catfish and Realm, for coming on.
No worries.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. We'll look later this week to get onto the halves, whether they combine both positions or not, but it'll surely be an interesting discussion, particularly the double Hines-Cleary strat. All right. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.